Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, this was dated 11 March 2010. Scientology Insiders' Nightmare Childhood. Another story of child abuse in Scientology. By Sarah Collerton. Karen left and an unidentified shipmate on board the Scientology ship, the Athena of Scandinavia, in 1971. How many times have we heard this ship brought up? Remember, I was reaching out to you guys to start a log of who were on these ships, because that's reasonable deduction. Then you can start to see who the perpetrators were. It's not hard. But anyways, if anyone could help me with that, I would super appreciate it. Because we have the Athena. What was the other one? It's escaping my mind right now, but there's about 3 or 4 of them. Oh, the Apollo. A former Scientologist who says she was a child slave and alleges she saw a 6-year-old boy chained up. A 6-year-old boy chained up, LAPD, in a ship's hold, is disappointed the Senate has blocked a full inquiry into the religious organization. This is in Australia. And as far as I'm concerned, Senator Nick Xenophon is a hero. That's a real hero. Independent Senator Nick Xenophon has been calling for a full inquiry into the church since revealing claims of forced abortions and other abuses in Parliament last year. Karen, 54, grew up in the church and has asked the ABC to identify her only by her first name. She says she was a victim of hard labor, mental brutality, and separation on Scientology ships, which were used for the church's elite band of followers in the 1960s to 1970s. She is angry the motion for a Scientology probe has been blocked in Parliament. Australia is an egalitarian society. Scientology is not egalitarian, she told ABC News Online. In my opinion, from the research that I've done, it's seriously narcissistic and most definitely misogynistic. It's my opinion, it's free. There is no protection for workers and no protection for children. Children, LAPD, children, Australian police, children, Boston PD, children, Austin PD, children, Denver PD, Chi-Town PD. It's the push for the inquiry that has brought me out of the woodwork. Karen says her mother was a founding member of the church. You know, abuse is rampant. And went on to become the CEO, prestigious executive, of Scientology in South Africa. South Africa. You know, where apartheid happened. It should be banned. It's a very dangerous pseudo-religion and corporate enterprise, and it really needs to be looked at very closely, she said. Imagine, this is 2010, so that's 15 years ago. She'd be in her 70s now if she's still alive. If it's not looked at very closely and monitored, and checks and balances put in place, then one day people are going to look back and say, this is bad news and we did nothing. Well, kind of like the LAPD. The structure is very totalitarian, and I just think it's very bad for mental health. They need to look into the separation of families. I know many broken families because of Scientology. Karen wants an inquiry to investigate living and labor conditions as well as schooling for children. Schooling for children. Working, children working, children working. For the organization at a young age. Against the law, of course. There is a belief in Scientology that normal schooling simply indoctrinates you with social norms and ideologies. So they prefer to indoctrinate with their own ideologies, mind control. With the result that Scientology children, if they manage to leave, are usually unskilled and uneducated. It's just how they want it. Are you guys seeing a pattern with what's happening throughout the world? Wakey, wakey. This forces them back into the world they know. In other words, Scientology recreates its own labor force, she said. People just get so brainwashed, and it's made so difficult for people to leave as it was designed. It's black magic. They just don't. Staff members don't get paid, so they can't accumulate money to leave. It's another thing that was built into the system. This is Trafficking 101. If you guys ever listen to other stories of various types of trafficking, the first thing the pimp or the handler will do is tell the person they brought, let's say they brought them to Canada, which happens quite often, or it's, what do they call them in Mexico? They call them coyotes. They bring someone over the Mexican border illegally. First thing that they'll do is tell them, now you owe me all this money. It's been going on for thousands of years. Thousands of years. And it happens to children as well. It's a system. There's a belief system that if you find something wrong with Scientology, then there's something wrong with you. It's also narcissism. You cannot find any fault with a narcissist. It's the same thing. That's instilled in you so deeply that it's very hard to shake. Yeah, they make you mind control yourself. That's a mind F. And again, another nightmare childhood that the governments across the world don't give an F about. Karen's decision to speak openly about her experiences comes after ABC's Four Corners program, The X-Files, in which former members told of forced abortions, pressure to work extreme hours, upstat, downstat stuff, and being forced to hand over large sums of money, otherwise known as extortion, right? What else is this called? Coercion. Members of Scientology's elite unit, this is also a bullshit story right here. It's all complete bullshit. There's nothing elite about the Sea Org. Full-time staffers, the Sea Organization, or Sea Org, detailed allegations of a strict regime of discipline and punishment in place during the 1960s. Does that sound like corporal punishment to you? Corporal punishment is a crime. Let's go look it up. Scientology has denied the claims. Deny. But Karen says she can back up the allegations. She says she signed a billion-year contract as a 12-year-old, lived on the Scientology vessels, the Royal Scotman. Oh, that's another one. So we got the Scotman, we've got the Athena, we've got the Apollo. And was in effect a child slave. Where have we heard this before? I believe Valerie Haney is the other lady who has a current lawsuit against F. Scientology. When we were on the ship, we had people working 20 hours a day. There's that people word again. People in Scientology always includes children. Working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, she said. It'd be interesting to if we had any data, because they try to hide it, how many accidents have happened. Car accidents, work accidents, because of the sleep deprivation. Another form of mind control. So you got the isolation, mind control. Taking people on ships, another form of isolation. They can't escape. What's the other one? Separating husbands from wives, isolation. Separating parents from their children, isolation. Separating children from their friends, isolation. It was a nightmare for me and my brother. For most of our lives, we were separated from our mother. What'd I just say? Because she was in the Sea Org. But also, her mother could have stood up, and she didn't. Because none of them do. Well, maybe one or two. A lot of the children hadn't seen their parents for months. And this is, look at the wording here. Look at the wording. I'm going to read what she has written, or she has stated, and then I'm going to interpret in normalese. A lot of the children hadn't seen their parents for months, and their parents were on the same ship. Okay, here's my interpretation in normalese. My parents never came to see me. My parents never stood up for me. My parents never protected me. My parents didn't care enough about me to get me off of the ship, to get themselves off the ship. That's it. She says what she saw happen to one child, a 6-year-old boy named Larry. A 6-year-old boy named Larry. 6 years old. LAPD. Still haunts her today. I've carried him with me all my life, and I want to put it on record what I saw, she said. While working on one of the Sea Org boats, which was a former cattle ship, the irony, Karen heard a clinking sound and found the boy in the hold. See, this is why we need to deduce who were on those ships, you guys. Even if they never pay the price by law, because, at least we can shame them for doing that to the children. Even if they don't have the shame, we can bring on the narcissistic shame. You know what I mean? Larry was chained by his leg, and he was there for a few days. A 6-year-old, you guys. He was fed, but he was chained, she said. It's very satanic, you guys. Whether a person is knowingly following a satanic ritual or not, that's a very satanic thing to do. She says she was forced to disconnect from her father. There's the wording again, you see? Why didn't the father stand up for her? Who did not want to be part of the church. Oh, wait, okay. I screwed that up. So she was a child. She says she was forced to disconnect from her father, who did not want to be part of the church. Why didn't he take his child with him? You guys see what I mean? They say they don't break up families, but they most definitely do. she said. So this is always people are putting it on they, like Scientology. But who makes up Scientology? They do. So the only way this can continue to go on is if you continue to go along with the program. I know it's not easy, but I just want to be honest here, On Four Corners, Scientologist Tommy Davis, that's the new render, by the way, claim they have no disconnection policy. Sure lies. Sure story. That's an outright lie. He's just like Rinder. Unless they've changed that. I was told to disconnect from my father, that he would suppress us. I was told to write a letter to him when I was 6 to disconnect from him. L. Ron Hubbard. Originally, the prospect of sailing the high seas, having adventures and not going to school anymore, was exciting to Karen, but she soon realized the reality of life in the Sea Org. She says it was worse than jail. Australian authorities, they're fine with it. LAPD's fine with it. My brother was allocated a job in the engine room of the shift as a greaser. He was 10. I was working in the canteen. There's another child kitchen worker. Did I tell you guys? Everyone wants to save the adults. But who's allowing this to go on? Or actively participating in the abuse to children? I was working in the canteen, and we were both working 20-hour shifts, she said. Wonder how old, she would have said how old she was. So her brother was 10, working 20-hour shifts. I think I've touched on this story before, but that's okay. I didn't see him for weeks, and then one day I bumped into him in the doorways between the dormitories. And he was this little thing, covered in grease with these big red eyes. Oh, that's so sad. And he saw me, and he started crying. And he said he wanted to go home. It's so sad. At that stage, you could petition the Commodore. The fake Commodore, by the way, you guys. He's a fake Commodore. He never really was one. Was L. Ron Hubbard, who was living on the ship, up in his luxury apartment, with his slaves. I petitioned him, and he went home straight away. But you had to have a replacement for him, so I took my brother's place in the engine room. It's just like an employer. So things were a little different in the early days of Scientology, because at least, as bad as it was, at least she could save her brother. You know what I mean? That won't happen now. Well, Karen was not aware of any forced abortions. She said she remembers cruel punishments, such as people being locked in dark hatches, and at other times being forced to do hard labor at double time. Double time is running. They got to... Hubbard wasn't even clever enough to not steal. He had to steal words from other organizations like the military or, philosophers, scientists, because, he was a flunky scientist. Flunked physics and a whole bunch of things. One of the punishments they had was throwing you overboard. Children, by the way, you guys. Which happened to my mother on a regular basis, she said. Also, too, in defense of some of the Scientology parents, I do think a lot of them wanted to try to help their children. But you see, wouldn't you love to know who was throwing her overboard? The men, because it was men doing this, right? Because they hate women. The men that were throwing her mother overboard, it could be that the mom kept asking about the children and she was trying to help the children, right? So what did they do? They kept throwing her off the ship to keep her exhausted, to keep her distracted, to keep her just trying to preserve her own life, and she couldn't help her children. You see, I've seen that a lot. They do that a lot. So the mothers that really do care about their children and want to rescue them and protect them, they keep them up 18, 19 hours. And I'm not giving the mothers excuses, but you see, that's a tactic. They did it to the fathers too. I remember reading a story in which, and I think it was on the Apollo, in which Hubbard made one of the senior executives, and this was like when Scientology first started, made him push, I think it was a peanut, around the floor of the ship with his nose. And it was because the father kept asking about his daughter. He was trying to help his kids. And then Hubbard was going to humiliate the father and make him push this peanut around the ship with his nose. And then the man's nose got all bloody and stuff. It was just awful. It was just awful. And it wasn't just that man that was humiliated. They did it to some of the women, and it was just awful things, you guys. Those thrown overboard were rescued. It's also a mind control tactic. I mean, I don't need to keep repeating it to you guys. You guys know that. Karen also knew Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. Lucky her. And recalls seeing him around the ship in a white sailor suit. Because he couldn't make it in the Navy. He wants everyone to join in his delusions. It's disgusting. Listen to this, you guys. He was a very powerful, enigmatic figure, she said. Narcissist. Couldn't brush his teeth. As an individual, he had a very powerful force about him. Like P. Diddy. And I could see people would quiver in his presence. It's because they were afraid of him. He had immense self-belief in the flesh. He didn't wander around like some demented, nutty professor. It's called narcissism. Psychopath. Tracking her down. Karen, who moved from South Africa to Australia in 1989, worked on the ships until she was 13. Until she was 13. So she was really young on that ship. It gives me goosebumps. When she was rescued by her grandmother, thank God someone in the family had some common sense. It's called maternal instinct for people who don't understand what it is. Because even though I didn't bear children, or what was that, bore? Even though I didn't give birth to children, I have it. For years, she has kept the torment to herself and only occasionally spoken about it to her brother, who is still bitter and angry about their upbringing, as he should be. She did not want to speak publicly out of fear and conflicted loyalty to her mother. This is what I don't understand, you guys. I think some of this is trauma bonding. I think some of it is trauma bonding. Who stayed a devout Scientologist until she died. We might as well just change that to stayed an indoctrinated, moronic, imbecilic slave until she died. Let's just be honest. Who gave up her children. Karen was left frightened after Scientologists tracked her down on Facebook and called her 42 years after she left the organization. Sick. I thought it was well and truly behind me, she said. That's also, too, they like to keep you on edge. Keep you scared. She also says they have been harassing her brother, who still lives in South Africa, calling him day and night. I think more of these Scientologists that do the fair gaming, I think they should personally go to people's homes, especially in the country. Especially. And I bet they won't do that shit no more. Big business. Karen says over the years, Scientology has changed from the more idealistic early days. It's what I've heard that they were, Some of what happened in Scientology in the early days, some of it was fun. Not for the children, but when it was first starting. They've really refined their acts and become very slick at marketing and promotions and corporate management, she said. Well, it's all fallen down now, thank God. They're still doing what they've always done, but they've just morphed into something slicker, so they're much more dangerous than they were before. I'm really nervous about where it's going. It's just infiltrated so many educational programs, management programs. What makes Karen very angry is a celebrity following. When I hear John Travolta and Tom Cruise come out and say, "This is the way," I think, have you actually ever been behind the scenes of the Celebrity Center to see how they live? They don't, she said. They know what's going on. They know Tom Cruise knows what's going on, and so does John Travolta. It's a fact. The hard work is done by staff members. The people that have money do what people with money always do. They just throw money at stuff and people are nice to them. Yeah? Go back, and if you guys have a chance, you can look up on my channel. I read an article regarding John Travolta and his autistic son, and a local restaurateur from LA outed him and gave his opinion on John Travolta, how he treated his son. So, wasn't my opinion. I was just reading an article. In Scientology has always courted celebrities because that is their legitimization, and it's working. Not anymore. I guess Rebecca Minkoff's learning, isn't she? If there's one thing I can say, though, because Tom Cruise jumped on that stupid couch, that actually started the ridicule. And the ridicule has grown bigger and bigger and started to undermine Scientology's image. It's true. Scientology has changed. The ABC has approached the Church of Scientology about Karen's claims. Oh, this should be good, you guys. Scientology's Australian spokesman, ignoramus moron probably, Cyrus Brooks, says after the Sea Org was formed in 1967, it took several years to settle itself. And there were a few staff who were violating the church policy at the time. Brooks, would that be like children? Huh? Brooks, you mean like putting children in ethics handlings? Is that what you mean? Yeah, Brooks, I think that's what you mean. What we have today is far from its earliest days, he said. It's all this gaslighting they do. As we have grown and evolved, we have formulated strict regulations as to conduct of staff, like children. Brooks, like children, right? And conditions, and we also have a much firmer screening policy of those who apply and join. Like children, Brooks? Like all those children that you recruit from the middle schools and the high schools? You mean like them, right, Brooks? That's called child trafficking. He says children have not been allowed, listen to this lie, you guys, to join the Sea Org for more than 20 years. You know, you got to admit, one thing they are good at doing in Scientology is lying. We all know that. However, the ABC's Four Corners investigation found members have been recruited and separated from their families from the age of 14 since then. Mr. Brooks says the Sea Org's 5,000 members, who are now on dry land, do not get paid. Imagine in his idiotic mind thinking that that was a good thing to say. Wow, unreal. We don't expect a wage and we don't do it for a wage. Because, you know, we got to tell the slaves something, right? We know this before we join, and it's a major decision to do so, he said. You know, like the 9-year-olds that go into the Sea Org, right? We understand that we are going to be working almost full time. Oh, it's just hard to read this crap, including a work day along with religious studies and practice daily. Indoctrination. Mr. Brooks says if members are in touch with people the church opposes, you mean like suppressive people, they cannot go to church services. Ooh, suppressive people, squirrels too. If a current member by way of family connection or another relationship is connected with someone who is violently opposed to Scientology, ooh, suppressive, and engaging in conduct to attack the church, ooh, you can't question the church. Anyone that asks the question is attacking. Is that kind of like the policy Hubbard made on attack, attack, attack? We state that while the upset remains, they are unable to have church services until they resolve the situation. Why don't you open your church services for the public so they can see what you guys do in your services? Inquiring MF minds want to know. A person who is connected with someone against their religious faith by experience does not make spiritual gains. And then to top it off, he's talking in Scientologese as if people understand what he's talking about. Oh, it's just unreal. As any gains they make are invalidated by the antagonistic source. I mean, they actually talk like this. I'm over it, you guys. So I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night, wherever you are. Peace.